So let's take a look at slide 6, still on this theme of 11N pre-standard draft form, becoming accepted. This gives us an idea of wireless LAN usage in terms of the various flavors of 802.11 and in the context of mobile broadband WANs. You can see that 802.11g is pervasive throughout most organizations, with its predecessor 802.11b also liberally deployed. No surprises there. So the greatest expectation for growth, as you can see by the red bars, lies with 802.11n, particularly in the 5 gigahertz band, which is less cluttered and offers up to 12 non-overlapping channels in the U.S. and up to 27 worldwide. This compares to the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum's 3 non-overlapping channels. And in fact, as a side note, one of the issues holding up ratification of the 11N standard is dissent over whether channel-bonded 40 megahertz configurations, which are necessary to achieve 802.11n's optimum throughput, should even be allowed in the 2.4 gigahertz band. Anyway, you can see that going forward, enterprises more or less intend to halt deploying ABG networks and begin using 11N, again, particularly in the 5 gigahertz range. Now, just 8% of respondents are actually running any 5 gigahertz 11N today, but 60% said they plan to. In terms of 2.4 gigahertz deployment, 16% already have deployed some 802.11 presumably for its backward compatibility with 802.11g and B, and 47% plan to deploy it there going forward. So again, let's talk about this a little bit. Kevin, it's clear from these results that 11N is the place where most wireless growth will come from in the near future. Let's chat a bit about how to advise enterprises to transition to the new networks. Does Motorola have kind of a coexistence strategy or migration plan that it likes to share with its customer base?
Sure, Joni, and I think you hit the key element there is the customer base. What we do is we take a look at what a customer might currently have deployed, because honestly, each implementation is different. But general rules of thumb, as you indicated in the data, 802.11n in the 5 gigahertz spectrum is really where we recommend our customers look at as their growth channel, their growth area. As you indicate, that's a less congested band, and as such, things like VoIP or very business-critical, mission-critical applications, we definitely recommend move to the 5 gigahertz and spectrum. And what we also recommend is, in terms of an easy transition, is to certainly, not look at a rip and replace. The devices are coming out. They're not certainly they're not ubiquitous in the enterprise yet, but they're certainly coming out. And in order to maintain a good level of performance on both the legacy networks and the new end networks, we actually, in some customers, we recommend leaving the BG devices on a 2.4 BG network, and as new upgrades are required, whether it's device side, et cetera, we recommend they be rolled into 802.11n on the 5 gigahertz side. That way, you'll maintain that current network. You can you keep that running, et cetera. Yet you can grow and take advantage of that great bandwidth on the 802.11 5 gigahertz side.
So, in other words, let's say I had a dual radio access point, one in 2.4, one in 5 gig. The 2.4 radio could continue to serve my B and G clients as always, and the 5 gigahertz radio could begin serving the new end clients as they come into the environment?
Absolutely, Joni. It's a great option for customers. And I'll even put one other out there that we're talking to a lot more customers about currently, and that is not only using wireless to serve the endpoint, but also using wireless as a layer 2 distribution mechanism in order to bring the traffic back and forth from the data center. Now there, we might utilize that second radio or potentially even a third radio and a 3 radio AP on 802.11n in order to mesh the traffic back and forth wirelessly. You avoid the cost of that redundant parallel wired network that's currently being utilized today, and you have a lot more flexibility in deploying that network deeper or as your business grows. So there's the third recommendation that we're bringing to certain customers who really see the cost advantage of using mesh as opposed to a wireless overlay network.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm very bullish on mesh myself. Big fan.
Great.
Okay, so let's move on. And here on slide 7 brings us back to some of the trends that I mentioned early on about wireless network architectures and management. And again, 5 years ago, back in 2004 when we started doing this research, few of the respondents were familiar with wireless architectures that had thinner access points and more intelligence placed in the controller or so-called wireless switch. At that time, about a third had heard of such architectures, but said they didn't know enough about them to even consider using them. So fast forward to August 2008, when nearly half the crowd was using or planning to soon use the thin access points with a central controller, and another 39% were going the route of smarter APs, albeit still with centralized management. The reason I said at the beginning of this presentation that we've almost come full circle is that there is now already a trend back from centralized controllers toward distributing at least some features and functions out to access points to avoid controller bottlenecks as 802.11n heavy traffic loads ramp up. Interestingly, this year, a fairly small number of respondents seemed privy to the idea of splitting features and functions between controllers and APs, just as they were unfamiliar with the centralized concept a good 18 to 20 months after the vendors started marketing those architectures. And you can see that in the slide kind of down at the bottom, third from the bottom, where intelligence split between APs and controller or switch. We're in the teens there with folks who are planning to do that kind of architecture, about 17%. As wireless LANs grow, and 802.11n traffic loads become pervasive, more and more companies will likely find themselves using architectures that distribute the load in some way while preserving a centralized control. What's also good news is that some 802.11 ABG products and many of the Draft 11N products support mesh capabilities, which Kevin and I were just talking about. Mesh allows a population of access points to communicate directly with one another over the air, rather than having to communicate over a cable to an Ethernet or wireless switch and then back out across another cable to the other access point. You can see from this slide that there's a respectable amount of interest in mesh. Nearly a third said that they are already using it or intend to deploy it in the next 6 months. As we kind of hit on earlier, mesh is useful on a number of fronts. By allowing APs to communicate over the air, the enterprise can get rid of significantly more cabling, as Kevin mentioned, because each access point doesn't have to be cabled directly to a wired LAN device. A few edge APs will need wired connections, of course, but the majority of APs will not. So enterprises can use mesh simply to alleviate the cabling burden. They can also use it as a backhaul network in a migratory situation from older wireless LANs. For example, organizations with pervasive 802.11b and G traffic might continue to use the 2.0 gigahertz network for their client access, as we talked about earlier, and then install an 802.11n backbone in the 5 gigahertz band as an aggregation technology.